The NFL has some major problems right now, and I'm not talking about the drug use or the domestic abuse. They're trying to deal with those. No, I'm talking about the problem with concussions and other brain-related injuries of their players that seemed like they were sort of rare at one point, and now more and more evidence is piling up that this is a pervasive, systemic problem throughout the NFL for current players and past players. Here is some new information coming from a Frontline report on PBS. They had brains of deceased NFL players that were submitted for study. 76 of 79 deceased NFL players suffered from the degenerative brain disease chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Now, if you don't watch as much House as I do and you're not familiar with that, here are some details. CTE is caused by repeated head trauma where the functioning of the brain is interrupted and nerve cells begin to die. It is associated with memory loss, confusion, impaired judgment, impulse control problems, aggression, depression, and eventually progressive dementia. Now, of course, they admit that the study's brain specimens were donated by players and families who suspected the presence of the disease. So, of course, this is a skewed population. But just the fact that you have dozens and dozens and dozens of players for whom it seemed obvious that they were suffering from these sorts of problems, I think that points to a much larger problem for the NFL. More information. A recent study of the brain tissue of 128 former football players. Now, this goes beyond just the NFL. This is including professionals, semi-professionals, college players, and high school players. Almost 80% of all the football players and more than 95% of the former NFL players in the study suffered from the disease. Now, this is important and worth discussing because this is not just an NFL problem. This goes beyond just those who play professionally, those who play perhaps the roughest games. We're talking about people at the semi-professional and even amateur level. I mean, we're talking down into possibly high school, and people just playing sort of casually. Obviously, they wouldn't play as much as NFL players, but they're still suffering from these diseases like CTE. Now, the reason that I want to talk about this, I don't follow football as much as I did in the past. But as a person who played football growing up and theoretically at some point might have children that want to play football, the obvious follow-up to these studies is to, one, question what the NFL is going to do about it. Obviously, they want to increase safety when possible, so long as it doesn't cut into their profits too much. But is it actually possible to stop this from happening? Is there a padding durable enough or protective enough that you can put into their helmets that will actually stop this from happening? It's not immediately clear at this point that that is possible. The helmets that they have currently are much safer than those in past decades. Imagine if you were to go back 80 years and look at the brains of those players, you would expect far more damage to have been done. And look, we listed the symptoms there. I mean, it might seem like, oh yeah, they have impulse control problems and aggression. Maybe that has something to do with the domestic abuse. I mean, maybe this is manifesting in other ways beyond just depression and problems that they suffer with internally and by themselves. Maybe this is actually manifesting externally as well. And secondly, the second thing I want to talk about is, of course, and this is being raised as a point of discussion for many people, I think, around the country. We played football growing up. The idea is that our children would play football someday. That's part of America. But should we allow that to happen? I mean, if you talk about banning football for, high school or Pop Warner or something like that, many Americans are going to be incredibly uncomfortable with that because they feel like you're coming for their liberties or something. But at the same time, it's one thing to say you should be free to do something even if it harms you. And in many cases, I will listen to that argument and perhaps even agree with it. But we're not talking about adults, being able to play football. If adults want to play football, I don't think anyone's going to stop them. The NFL is not going to be shut down tomorrow. But for kids who, they feel the peer pressure of wanting to fit in, one way to do that is to play football. They're encouraged by their family and by their friends. Allowing them to do it when they do not have the intellectual capacity to understand the long-term damage that might be done to their brains, the problems it might cause for them as they develop into adults, that's a different story. And I understand that in saying that perhaps we shouldn't allow children to play, many people, perhaps even you watching this, are going to disagree with me. But if you know that it does damage as you play, as you grow up, as you go into high school and college ball, if you know that it's doing the damage, then how is that not a form of child abuse for the parents to push for it and to fight against a ban? To say, no, I care more about this traditional sport that we used to play, and I'm willing to risk even the life. I mean, we're talking about the brain, but we're talking about the life at the end of the day of their kids. That I don't know about, particularly when there are so many other sports they can play that don't have these sorts of pervasive long-term deleterious effects to the brain. I think look, it's a big question. It's one that as a country we are going to have to talk about and think about quite a bit before making a decision, obviously. But it looks like as more and more of these studies are done, we do need to actually figure out what we're going to do. Are we going to allow it to continue at the NFL level without further protections? And are we going to allow kids to continue to expose themselves to possibly long-term incredible risk? I think that's a good question and a good debate to have.